Okay, so we are going to be starting Chapter 3 on the U.S. Constitution. Our Constitution starts off off the bat with the ideals of the Constitution, and the ideals are the best parts of it, the goals of our Constitution, and those are laid out in our preamble. And the preamble is the introduction at the beginning of the Constitution, and what it does is it basically explains why this Constitution was written, and it gives us 6 goals. The first is that it's going to help us form a more perfect union, that it's going to help all of our little states to get along and become more unified as a country as opposed to little countries, 13 little countries. The second goal is that it's going to help establish justice. Remember, the Articles of Confederation did not allow for a judicial branch, and so that's what this one's going to do. The Constitution is going to do that. The third is that it ensures domestic tranquility, basically meaning that our little states are not going to fight each other, that they're going to get along, they're going to behave themselves. The fourth is to provide for the common defense, meaning protecting the entire nation from foreign influence or from foreign invasion. The fifth is to promote the general welfare, and that just means keeping people happy and healthy. And the sixth is to secure the blessings of liberty, which basically sums up that they're going to protect your freedoms and make sure that your freedoms remain your freedoms, your rights. So our Constitution sets up a representative democracy. Basically, that means that our government exists through the consent of those who are governed, through the will of the people. That's why it's here, that the people said it was okay. And there's a huge belief in majority rule, that majority rule is the decision of more than half of the people. But with that, they also respect the rights of minorities as well. So it's kind of a delicate balance that they have to maintain. Our Constitution also creates us as a federal system. And a federal system is a division between a national and state governments, that there's actually 2 types of government. You have your national government, your federal government, and the state governments. And they each have their own responsibilities and their own jobs to do. So in the Constitution, it kind of tells us what those jobs are. And the first is that there's federal government powers, which are called the delegated powers. And those are powers that only the federal government can do, like being able to make money, providing for a military, controlling trade, declaring war. Those would be examples. The second type of powers are state government powers, and they're called reserved powers because they're set aside or reserved for the states. That these are things that the states do, like conducting elections or establishing local governments, setting up schools, establishing marriage laws, those kinds of things. The third type are shared powers, so that both the national and the state governments are able to do these things, and they're called concurrent powers. And so both the state and the federal government are able to tax. They're both able to establish courts. They're both able to create banks. They're both able to enforce laws and punishments for breaking those laws. So those would be all examples of concurrent powers. However, within the Constitution, it also says that the government has limited powers. That keeps the federal government from becoming too powerful, that there are certain things that the states are able to do, and the federal government has no choice in that. It also sets up us having 3 branches of government. We have the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. And the legislative body is in charge of making our laws, and it's called Congress. And Congress is made up of 2 houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate. And then we have the executive branch, whose job it is to carry out those laws and to make sure that they're being followed. And so that would be the president and his cabinet. The third branch is the judicial branch, and the judicial branch interprets the law. So they make sure, or they decide, when are you exactly breaking this law, or what is this law a good law? Is it allowable? And so that would be the Supreme Court, and that's what their job is. Within the Constitution, another major point of it is checks and balances, that each branch is able to check the power of the other 2 branches, so they can't become too powerful. For example, the president is able to check the legislative branch by vetoing laws. He can say, I don't like this law, and veto it. And that checks the power of the Congress. He also can check the judicial branch by appointing justices to the Supreme Court. So he has a say in who makes the determinations about what laws are constitutional or not. The Supreme Court is able to check the legislative branch. So the judicial branch is able to check the legislative branch by declaring laws of Congress to be unconstitutional, that they can't pass that law because it's not in keeping with the rules of the Constitution. They can also, the judicial branch can also check the executive branch by declaring acts of the president to be unconstitutional. So if he makes an agreement with another country and they don't find that to be constitutional, they can say, you can't do that. And then we have the legislative branch, or Congress, who can check the executive branch by overriding the vetoes. They can say, no, we really think this is a good law, and pass it anyway. They have to have 2/3 votes to do it, but they can pass it anyway. And they can also check the judicial branch by impeaching the judges. So if the judges do something illegal or aren't doing their job, they can impeach them and get rid of them. So that's ways that they can check and balance each other out. The Constitution also provides for change, that there's ways to change it, because the Founding Fathers knew that that may need to happen occasionally. And so it's a very flexible document in that way, that you're able to change it. And there's 3 ways that are used today to change the Constitution or to add meaning to the Constitution. And the first is an amendment process. And the amendment process is actually changing the writing of the Constitution, that it's a written change added to. There's only 27 amendments today, so that means they really haven't had to change just a whole lot in the writing, actual physical writing of the Constitution. And typically they need to have the approval of 3/4 of the states. So it gets proposed by Congress, and then it goes to the states, and the states have to approve it. The second way is through interpretation, how you can interpret different things in the Constitution. And it entirely depends upon Congress and the President and what they read as the meaning of the Constitution. A good example would be like the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment talks about, the actual wording talks about the citizen's right or the state's right to maintain a militia. Well, a militia is like a National Guard or a police force or something like that, that citizens need to be able to have weapons in order to have this police force for protection. It doesn't say in it that everybody has the right to own a gun, but that's how we interpret it to mean that everybody has the ability to be, a part of the police force or the National Guard, so they should be able to have a weapon. So that's a way that custom is able, or interpretation is able to influence or change the Constitution. The third way is through custom, and custom is tradition. And a good example of custom in the way it has changed the Constitution would be the President's Cabinet. And the Cabinet is a group of advisors that help out the President. And it started all the way back with George Washington, the first president. He knew that as president, he was not knowledgeable or didn't know everything about everything. And so he thought it'd be easier if he had advisors to keep him up to date on things and to help him out and help make decisions. And so President Washington only had 4 members in his cabinet, and today President Obama has 15. So it makes a huge difference.